Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen is Joe Clark, my co-host, as always. Joe, the Steelers avoided being swept by the Browns for the first time since, 1988 or whatever that was, so bless on that. But how's your week otherwise?
Good. Yeah, I mean that was a bit of a slow start, a little bit scary there to start, but we'll dive into that in a few. But yeah, everything else going well.
Great, good to hear. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Browns in that game, recap, put a bow on that game. We'll cover injuries and specifically probably talking a good portion of that section about George Pickens and that whole situation. And then we will wrap it up by talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. If you want to have your question answered on a future episode, give that number at the bottom of the screen a call, 412-254-3145. And we need some more questions, so please do send us some. We would love to hear from you. You can leave a voicemail or give us a text, and we'll be happy to read that question off on your behalf. Other than that, we are going to dive right into our topics today. Like I said, we're going to be talking about the Browns to kick things off. The Steelers winning that game 27-14. It's just about the least flashy offensive performance you'll ever see from a 27-point performance. I still don't fully understand how they got to 27 points when I think about it, just from a 1,000-foot view. But Joe, where do you want to start with this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty noticeable that the offense wasn't ready to play without George Pickens when you start, they throw in that first quarter. They were pretty shaky, and then, I mean, they had the one field goal, and then the Browns drove, and somehow they lost Jerry Jeudy. I think Deshaun Elliott kind of had a coverage bust there. And it was 7-3, and you're like, uh-oh, we kind of saw the Steelers start slow and lose to the Browns last, there 2 games ago, and now it looks like it's happening again, but Russell Wilson settled in. He had two explosive pass plays to Pat Freiermuth. One of them was a touchdown. He had one to Mike Williams. So kind of got the downfield passing and working a little bit. And still, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren both had solid performances. Uh, all in all, they kind of just settled in the second quarter, especially in the third is when things really started to get rolling. And defense did their job. Myles Garrett was pretty much neutralized until the end of the game. TJ Watt played well. All in all, it ended up being a much better game than it looked like it would be in the first 15 minutes. So credit to the Steelers for kind of rebounding and not letting that slow start define how the game went. But definitely would like them to start quicker now. If Pickens has to miss some time, which we'll talk about later, they'll have time, to work with these other receivers and see what they can do without him. And hopefully they can kind of eliminate those slow starts from their offense, even though they had them with him. But without him, it was really noticeable that they kind of had no real identity through the air. So you didn't need to figure that one out for sure.
Yeah, Scotty Miller was told he'd be playing 3 minutes prior to the inactive list being announced, which is 90 minutes before the game. So we're talking about, basically an hour and a half that he had to mentally prepare himself to be playing in the game. Mike Williams being told, I think as he was kind of being stretched out on a table, hey, you need to be prepared to play X receiver a little more than normal. And so, yeah, a lot of sudden change for the offense to deal with. Pat Freiermuth found out from one of his friends texting him or something of that nature that Pickens wouldn't be playing. And so the offense wasn't necessarily prepared for that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the Pickens section later. But it was definitely a surprise to everybody that he wasn't able to play. And I think the product that they put out on the field reflected that. Jameis Winston, he prayed to the Lord that he would be delivered from pick sixes, and the Lord technically did answer his prayers, but he still managed to throw 2 interceptions, one directly at nose tackle Keeanu Benton, so I don't know if his prayers were fully answered there. The other one was from James Pierre. I think that, what is that? His second of the season, or is that
I
2
think it
for
was
James Pierre?
I think it was his first. I'll double check that. If he has two, that's pretty funny.
I feel
I
like
think that
he.
was his first. Yeah, that was number one for him this year.
Okay. Just one for Pierre, but still more than Minka Fitzpatrick. Not something you would have thought heading into the season, but yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the Keanu Benton one, just because I think that was basically one of the turning points of the game. At that point, the Steelers were. What was the score at that point? It was 7-3. Cleveland was up. And from that point, the Steelers did end up scoring a touchdown off of the interception there. for a second there, it looked like Benton had a chance at returning it, which would have been just hilarious. He got 11 yards on that return. The Steelers ended up scoring, going up 10-7, and they never looked back. They did not surrender the lead the rest of the game. So that was one of the big turning points. And Benton, it was really just a heads-up play because you're taught this from a pretty young age if you're a defensive lineman. If somebody stops blocking you, red alarm bells need to be going off in your head. And that is exactly what happened. His guy kind of shed him. And when the offensive lineman starts shedding you, it's a pretty telltale sign that something's going on. And he basically just located the running back, got out there in space, and made a heck of a catch above his head with 2 hands. So props to Benton. He said he's got a history of being ball aware. And I think he said he didn't have any in college, but he did have an interception like that in high school. So this is not new to him, and it wasn't just a freak accident. This is something that they drill in practice. This is something that this is basically went according to plan for when they identified that screen pass. So big, huge play by Benton in that regard. I think Beanie Bishop was that who was coming off the edge there and kind of forced Jameis to more or less pump fake and bought Benton that extra second necessary to get in position. So a good team play there overall. And I think that's the name of this game is, the Steelers ended up scoring a touchdown that next drive. The name of this game was pretty much complimentary football. That's how they got to 27 points. It certainly wasn't the performance of the offense. I mean, let's see, total yards. The Steelers put up 267. They got outgained by the Browns. It's one of their technically worst performances on offense all season in terms of yards gained. I haven't looked to stack it up against the others, but it's got to be up there as one of their worst. Russell Wilson, only 158 passing yards. I would imagine that is his worst, but he was over 100 passer rating, so he was efficient enough. He had those 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, so decent game. I want to talk a little bit about, what do you think happened with Najee Harris and why, at the beginning of the game, he was the only thing working. It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he was going for a big gain. He was breaking tackles. Next thing you know, we don't see Najee for a little bit. Next thing you know, Jaylen Warren's in there. And Jaylen, to his credit, also had a very good game. But it seemed interesting to me to take Harris out of the flow like that and kind of get him out of a rhythm when he was the only thing working. Joe, do you have any opinions on that?
I think it was stupid. I don't really know why they would go away from him. He was, churning out big gains. I think he was averaging something like 5.6 or 6 yards per carry through his first few runs, and they just completely went over. I mean, Warren was in the game. We even saw Cordero Patterson in there a few times. I didn't really understand them going away from him at all. And I think he kind of took him out of his flow and out of his rhythm. I mean, he only finished with 53 yards on the ground. I think he would have had a much bigger day if they kept him in there more consistently. And I understand, yeah, you can't ride him. You have other good running backs. Warren averaged 5.2 yards per carry. He's a guy that you want to see a lot out of. And at this point late in the season, you want to keep Najee ready for, the Eagles and the Ravens and the Chiefs and the playoffs. You want to keep him fresh. But when he's the only part of your offense that's really working, I would just kind of roll with him and see what he can do and get him in a rhythm. And then later in the game, when you have, your lead established, is then when you can go and kind of work in some of these other guys a little bit more. But just not a decision I loved. But hopefully, we'll see more Najee this weekend. This is a big test against the Eagles. They got a pretty good front. They're a top 10 run defense. Zach Bond's been one of the best linebackers in football. So good opportunity for him to kind of have a good game against a good team.
Yeah, I was equally as confused what was happening with Harris there. I really thought it was going to be one of those games where Harris went up over 100 yards and all of that. And like you said, he only ended up with, 53 yards, which is, he had a 20-yard run on the second drive. So he basically did not very much the rest of the game. And he didn't get involved that as a receiver either. So it's not like they were getting him involved in other ways. So a little bit confusing there. I kind of wish somebody would have asked Tallman about that in the post-game press conference just because it seemed pertinent to me. But otherwise, the Steelers had 3 total turnovers, including the muffed punt that was it Skoranek that recovered that?
Yeah, cost Kadarius Toney's job in his career.
Yeah. It seems like the Browns always have a late season loss to the Steelers that ends in somebody losing a job. Usually it's the head coach, but this year it was just Kadarius Toney. I guess we'll have to settle for that, which is fine. Yeah. What else from this game? T.J. Watt had an okay game. The first play, what was it? I think the first defensive play, he had that big tackle for loss. They didn't block him. Otherwise, he didn't light up the sheet really. No sacks for the day, but he did have a couple of good quarterback hits, and I think he generated quite a bit of pressure. Do you think he outplayed Myles Garrett just because Garrett did get that sack? And I mean, where TJ Watt, I'm sure, was trying to outplay Myles Garrett, but what's the decision there?
Yeah, I mean, I think early in the game, you look at the first half, Watt was getting consistent pressure, and the pass rush as a whole was working, but Garrett got the fumble recovery and the sack in the second half. So I think if you look at it in totality, Garrett probably had the better game, just given those things. I mean, I think he probably had another extra pressure too. He had three quarterback hits. Watt only had two quarterback hits. So I mean, yeah, I think you give Garrett the edge there, but the Steelers pass rush as a whole was, really, really working. And Hayward had two sacks. Highsmith had one, and he was getting consistent pressure. Call for that BS roughing that extended the Browns drive. I don't remember if that was on their touchdown drive or not, but either way, that was I think that was a terrible call. But yeah, having Highsmith back, I think, was kind of huge. You kind of see how much the Steelers front seven really feeds off each other because then Cam gets going. Um, One thing we didn't see a ton out of Herbig as the third outside linebacker. I think working that three outside linebacker rotation as Highsmith gets back up to speed and what is going to do his thing. Then I think give it a few games and Herbig will continue to kind of be a factor even as that third guy. But I was excited to see what Highsmith did. I mean, he's still just so underrated. I mean, we still have the discussion. Oh, is Herbig better than Highsmith? I think Highsmith is really one of the best pass rushers in football, and he just gets overshadowed by Watt. I think Herbig's really good. I don't want it to mean taking away that, just using it as an example as how Highsmith's a little undervalued, but really excited to have him back, and I think he can kind of really make an impact down the stretch and help the front seven really take over. Because I mean, the Eagles' offensive line this week is going to be a problem. Going to have to generate pressure. Going to have to stop the run, and Highsmith, as one of the best run defending outside linebackers or at least 3-4 outside linebackers in football, is going to be very important against Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I think if Highsmith had stayed healthy all year, he would have had probably a career year in terms of sacks and stuff like that. He's certainly, when he has been healthy, he's played very well. I think he had 6 pressures in this game. He had that early sack. 6 pressures may not sound like a ton, but that is a lot. I think that's the second most of his season. I think he had only second to a ridiculous, I think 11 or something.
With the Giants.
Yeah, so that's insane numbers that he's able to put up in some of these games. And I think because of the amount of attention teams are given to Watt, and we've kind of seen that in Watt's stat column this year, that's why guys like Herbig and Highsmith, and they're obviously good players, and it's not just because teams are paying attention to Watt, but it enables them to put up big numbers. And so I think it's kind of an unfortunate thing for Highsmith to deal with multiple injuries this year. But I am excited to see how that progresses the rest of the season. I think the wide receivers, we talked about this a little bit, but the depth, Scotty Miller played an okay game. He played way more snaps than he probably bargained for. I think it was the second most of his season, up in like the 30s. He played more than Mike Williams, which is a head scratcher to me. But Mike Williams finally got involved. He had 3 catches, I think.
3 catches for 36 yards, and Scotty had 3 for 38. So very similar stat lines there. And they both, I mean, Scotty Miller had a 21-yard grab down the grab down the left side late in the game, and then Mike Williams could have had another. He had the 22-yard grab, probably could have gotten called for OPI, but he had another long gain wiped out by OPI. I don't really understand why I think he only played 19 snaps
Yeah,
with Pickens out. I mean, maybe they're saving him. He's older. He's injury prone. Maybe they're kind of saving him more for the stretch too. But although then again, they didn't know that Pickens was going to be out long term during that game, so
right.
that doesn't track. But just kind of trying to come up with a reason why he's not playing. But I mean, Fryermuth's been good the last few games too, so that's kind of that's a positive. And this group will have a real big test on Sunday. So.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin said Mike Williams will be I forget the exact language. His stuff will incline or increase. He used some word to basically say that Williams is going to be playing more moving forward, and he's been saying that. So, how much do we believe him at this point? But I think finally this week will be probably the most he's played and the most he's been involved in the game plan because of this next topic we're going to dive into, which is Pickens and his injury and generally just the injury updates for the team. Before we dive into Pickens, just getting it out of the way, Elliott has a hamstring, Ogunjobi has a groin. I think those were the only other things that were of note. And it's kind of just something that to monitor early in the week. There's no indication that either of those players will miss, though we will see those soft tissue things can, as we found out with Pickens last week, can turn out to be a bigger deal than initially expected. And with Pickens, essentially what happened, Tomlin explained today, is Thursday after practice, he was getting some work in. He experienced some tightness. Friday, they gave him a limited practice because they wanted to basically have him ready to go for Sunday. Saturday, they did the walkthrough. It seemed like he was going to be good to go. And then, of course, as we said earlier, just 3 minutes before the inactive list came out, it seemed like the decision was kind of made. And Tomlin said that the injury was, quote, a little bit worse than initially expected. So it seems like the reporting on a grade 2 hamstring from Jerry Dulac and from Brooke Pryor seems to be correct at this point based on what Tomlin said. Our Dr. Melanie Friedlander for the site should have a comprehensive kind of those articles called the Doctor's In, breaking down the injury, the timeline for return, what the injury looks like, and all the medical stuff. So definitely be on the lookout for that tomorrow. Those are super informative. But based on one she put out for Cameron Hayward back in 2016, it looks like the typical timeline for return is usually between like a game and a half to 2.5 games. So he's already missed one. So we're probably looking at least, Tomlin, more or less, he didn't rule out Pickens, but more or less did. It seems like Pickens will miss this game, and then we'll see for the Ravens. I'm a little skeptical there. Joe, do you think Pickens, how many games, if you had to guess right now, when do you think he'd return? And this is just a wild guess out there.
I'd like to think before the Kansas City game, but the skeptic in me thinks it might be before the Bengals game because he heard it late in the week so he heard it late last week, so that's Friday. So rule him out Sunday he misses the Browns game, he misses this weekend against the Eagles. I think that's pretty much set in stone. Tom's like, yeah, if you press me, he's either out or doubtful, and that he's gonna be out. And then so you figure even if it's a 2-week recovery, he probably won't be fully healthy in time to play against the Ravens because that's a Saturday game, so that's a quick turnaround. And then you have the Chiefs on a Wednesday. So then that's tough. Like, how do you work him back in practice? He's not going to get a ton of practice time from the Saturday to Wednesday turnaround. So I think it's going to be tough for him to return even for then. I'd like to think maybe like, hey, he's healthy enough maybe it's one of those things like Nick Herbig said he could have returned a game earlier with his hamstring. Maybe it's like, oh, Pickens would have been healthy enough to play against the Ravens, but they're going to hold him out and have him full bore for the Chiefs. So maybe it's one of those things and he can return, but I kind of think he might be out until week 18, which not ideal, but I'd rather have him fully healthy for the postseason, assuming the Steelers do make the postseason. It seems very likely at this point they have a greater than 99% chance. I just don't want to jinx it by talking about the playoffs before they're in. But yeah, I mean, it sucks that he's going to be out against, probably out against the Eagles. You look at these games against the Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs. It's like, oh, this is how you can tell how good of a team the Steelers really are. Are they really legitimate Super Bowl contenders? Can they hang with these teams? Can they beat these teams? But you can't really tell that without your number one receiver. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of look without him. But yeah, I mean, these soft tissue injuries have been piling up all season for the Steelers, and it's not ideal, especially to lose Pickens in this setting, like after practice, getting work in, like just kind of a freak nature of the thing. Not fun, but hopefully he's able to return, sooner rather than later. I'm just a little skeptical about it.
Yeah, and this wasn't listed by Tomlin, but it's worth, I guess, talking about a little bit. TJ Watt seemed to suffer something in that game. He pulled up a little lame after one of the plays, and he checked right back into the game, so it didn't end up being a big thing. But I think it was a post-game interview with, I think it was Sal Pal on ESPN on SportsCenter, and Sal Pal asked him what he's looking forward to for this next week, and he said, getting healthy and stuff like that. So there's something going on with Watt. All that to say, and I guess it doesn't rise to the level of having to put it on the report, but that is something to be concerned about. I mean, everybody's dealing with something at this point in the year, but yeah, I mean, that would not be great if the Steelers were down Watt again in the stretch like they were last year. So, but as returning to Pickens, how do you think the Steelers? I mean, is it as simple as just now that they have a full week of, actually prepping the receivers, like guys like Scotty Miller and guys like, Mike Williams? Are they going to be able to perform better? Like, do you think that the Steelers can get more than 158 receiving yards out of this group without Pickens?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles secondary is very talented, so that's where it's like against the Eagles it's going to be difficult, but I do think like in general, yeah, they should be able to get more than, they should be able to exceed 200 with this group. I think give it a week cuz they last week they didn't really get any time at all without Pickens. Even Friday he was still limited. He still got some work in. So, if you figure that these guys like Scotty Miller probably went through practice last week not expecting to play, like Williams probably didn't expect to play all that much, and they probably weren't practicing, with the ones getting ready to really go. And even Calvin Austin last week, he missed time he was limited early in the week, at least with a concussion. Um, so now you have all these guys blend together a full week of practice and kind of prepare and know the rules going to be heading into game day and not, 90 minutes before the start of the game. I think things will look better. I think at least early on it won't be as sloppy as it was. But I mean, the Eagles secondary, I mean, Darius Slay had a big game last week. Quinyon Mitchell's been a stud as a rookie. I think he's one of those guys that's going to be one of those what ifs when you look back on it. I mean, obviously Fautano's out right now, so it's kind of tough to say, but Mitchell is a guy so heavily linked to the Steelers, and they let him slip by him, unless I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure they let him slip by him in the draft this year. So, but yeah, just that Eagles secondary is talented, so it'll be interesting to see how the Steelers handle it. I think there's going to be a lot of underneath stuff like they did against the Bengals, just to see, because I don't think they're really going to have many opportunities to take shots downfield. But do think the offense will be better. Going back to Watt, I think last year too, I think it was against that disaster Week 13 game against the Cardinals. I think he left late with something and ended up being fine, but he tweaked it, and then it was again Week 18 against the Ravens where he got hurt. So like, I wouldn't be opposed to giving him some extra rest days in practice. I know he's gotten plenty this season, but just give him a few more. I mean, I know he's a guy that wants to compete, but I really would not like to see him get hurt again at the end of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Let's. This is the year that Watt's supposed to get his first playoff win, and that would be a big shame if he had to watch that from the sidelines as they got their first win. As far as Pickens goes, going to put you on the spot a little bit. It sounds like, just reading between the lines from what you were saying, if you believe that there's a chance he doesn't return until Week 18, what's the Steelers' record? Just looking at these next three games, 3-0, 2-1, what do you think they go?
I think they could go 2-1, but I'm going to say they go 1-2. I think they can find a way to beat. I think they're going to lose the Eagles. I just it's tough. First like real game where they're expecting not to have Pickens, and just the Eagles offense. They've been so red hot. Like stopping Saquon's going to be a challenge. I think even though the Steelers' run defense has been good, they can just beat you so many ways. So. I'm not super confident, especially in Philadelphia. They haven't won in Philadelphia in 1965. That's before both my parents were born. So, um, yeah, not really too confident about that one. I do think they could beat the Ravens again, even in Baltimore. I mean, we've seen they kind of have the Ravens number, so we'll see. Ravens are going to be motivated for that one, and I do think they can beat the Chiefs. I mean, watching the Chiefs play against the Chargers the other night, they're so far from infallible. Like, yeah, they always find a way to win, but I mean, they started DJ Humphries. He was their third left tackle they've started this season. Their offensive line has just been shaky. Their weapons, even though they got Hopkins, aren't anything like super special. Pacheco doesn't look, as good as Pacheco has looked coming off the injury. So the run game's not really there to bolster him. I mean, their defense is really solid. Like, give them credit. The Chiefs have built a really good defense, but it's not like, oh my God, Patrick Mahomes, their offense is so tough to beat. Like, their offense doesn't even look all that good. I mean, they find a way to get it done. Like, credit to them that they find a way to get it done, but it's not a group that's like gonna boat race the Steelers like they did, in the playoffs 2 years ago, or even when they played them in the regular season. So even without Pickens, if he doesn't return for that game, I think they can find a way to beat either the Ravens or the Chiefs. So I'll go 1-2, but I think 2-1 is at least plausible.
Well, you said earlier this is supposed to be the Steelers' test. I'd say certainly if they go 2-1 against these people without Pickens, that is a massively passed test in and of itself. That is a aced test in that circumstance, and people are talking about this team as what can't they accomplish at that point. So I think I agree. I probably am more leaning towards if Pickens were to miss 3 games, which I'm at this point guessing he misses just 2. You're guessing he misses 4, right? Including what he
I
just missed.
including what he just missed. I would say that he misses the next 3 just
Right.
because I'm not sure about the quick turnaround against Kansas City.
Yeah, I think they find a way to get him involved against Kansas City, even if he misses that Ravens game. I think there's a chance he could be back for the Ravens game. Though the Steelers have been playing things pretty safe this year with these injuries. I mean, Mike Tomlin literally said the same thing. We want to prevent a small issue from becoming a large issue with Russell Wilson. And here we are hearing that about Pickens. And Wilson was out for like 3 months or something. So with, a return in the middle of that. But yeah, I think if in a scenario where he misses all the games that you think he's going to miss, 1 and 2 would be, I'd be very okay with 1 and 2 at that point against those 3 teams. And of course, the Steelers only need to win. Basically, one more game will clinch them for the playoffs. It doesn't matter which team they beat. If they beat the Ravens, that clinches the AFC North. If they lose to the Ravens, they need to beat the Bengals to have a chance. Well, basically, if the Ravens and Steelers end up with the same record and the Steelers lose to the Ravens there, then the Steelers really need to beat the Bengals in that final week to have the division tiebreaker and kick on down to whatever the other tiebreaker is. I believe right now that's projected to go to the Steelers. So chances are pretty good that they end up winning the AFC North. I think it's at like 70. Well, the New York Times gave them 65% to win the North, and ESPN FPI has given them like 80.6% right now. So they have themselves in a very good position to win the division. I think we talked about the Eagles kind of in this section, so we've kind of bled over into our third topic there. Is there anything that you're looking forward to seeing from Hard Knocks? And just touch on that real quick. What did you like from the first episode, and anything that you're hoping to see moving forward?
I think just seeing the dichotomy between Mike Tomlin and the other AFC North head coaches was, pretty cool to see. Like, it, great coaches across the division. Like, I don't think Zach Taylor's that great of a coach. Mostly great coaches throughout the division. I thought it was interesting. John Harbaugh didn't come across, as good as I thought. I guess like he didn't seem, you're watching through TV screen and they know there's cameras in the room, but it didn't seem like he really had the command of the room you'd expect him to see. It was just like as a public speaker, it was a little surprising to me. But I like seeing the Herbig angle, the Orlando Brown and Tomlin kind of getting on that early, just him recognizing stuff. This week, I want to see if they got anything with whatever supposedly happened between Jerry Jeudy and Joey Porter Jr. after the game. Was Porter Jr. talked after the game about some sort of scuffle, but there's no video of it anywhere, which you'd think if the two of them got into it, somebody in the stands would pull out their phone and catch something. So I'm curious to see what comes of that, and just kind of how the prep to see if there's any talk about not letting the Browns beat you again, whatever, blah, 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 or if it's just business as usual. Obviously the Browns locker room, if there's anything with Myles Garrett getting a little more rowdy than usual for this matchup, because he talked all that big game about being the best in the world ahead of last one, and then see if he gets ready to back it up. But yeah, just I thought it was a lot better than I thought it would be. I didn't expect a lot out of it, to be completely honest, and it was solid. So hopefully this week matches those expectations, and it'll be another big Steelers episode. Ravens are on bye, Bengals Monday night game, so you're not going to see much there, and then so really Steelers Browns is going to be the focus. So gonna be a lot of that.
Yeah, let's be honest. It's essentially a
Yeah.
a Steelers season that they are disguising as a whole division. I think 30 something minutes of the 53 minutes last time were dedicated. I mean, just a ridiculous fraction of the show last time was dedicated to Steelers. That's going to continue this week, and then of course, they're going to want to probably cover the Eagles thing because that's a big game. They're going to want to cover the Ravens, obviously, because that's division. And then they're going to want to cover the Chiefs because that's a big game. And it's on Christmas, and there's the Netflix stuff. I mean, it's going to be Steelers centric every week. And so, yeah, I look forward to seeing more of Mike Tomlin behind the scenes. Very much enjoyed that last week. And just, I hope we see, if there's one thing I hope we see, it's interactions with Pickens. I don't think Pickens barely made an appearance on last episode at all, really. So I would like to see more there, if anything. But I think that's everything for the show today. We got, Ben Roethlisberger podcast here in a few minutes that we'll be covering, and then we're going to have Hard Knocks tonight that we'll be looking at, so plenty more to do for us today. If you guys want to leave a question, please do give us a call, 412-254-3145. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will catch you guys next time.